change, well, there's this big narrative out there that says your sexuality, your sexual orientation is immutable and it can never change. And that anyone who's trying to help you change is only ever causing you harm. Well, what if that's not. Sorry, there's a massive possum going past. Let me try again. Is it a human right to be free to change? There's this huge narrative in culture that's saying your sexuality, your sexual orientation is immutable. It can never change. And that anyone who helps you try and change is actually doing you harm. But what if that's not the whole story? What if the right to choose your sexual orientation was a fundamental human right? And what if there's a different side to the story? Well, today we're with Mike Davidson, who's been in clinical practice for decades, and he's going to tell us a whole lot of stories and some key data that might make you more deeply understand this issue on a whole new level. And by the end of this time, you'll definitely understand sexual orientation and change efforts way more, and you'll have a total rethink on the way we've been told from culture can't change, always going to stay the same, and maybe what you should be thinking instead. Enjoy.
PJ, just to note, I'm not in clinical practice. They threw me out,
Uh-huh.
so I can't say I'm a clinician.
Sure.
And I never finished my training. Just so you.
No, no problems. Yeah, I can understand why that would be a challenge and also a calling. All right, I'll just do that once more. Is it a human right to be free to change? Okay, so there's this huge narrative in culture that says your sexuality, your sexual orientation is immutable and can never change. But what if that's not the whole story? What if it's a fundamental human right to be able to choose? Well, today we're going to be speaking with my good friend and clinical researcher, Mike Davidson, and he's the president of the IFTCC, the International Federation for Therapeutic Choice and Counseling. And counseling. And I probably said
Foundation.
International Foundation, not Federation. Got it.
I mean, it doesn't matter. But
Yeah,
but
yeah.
that
No, it's better to get it right. Is it a human right? Is it a human right to be free to change? Well, for so long, we've been told this one narrative that human sexuality is innate, that our sexual orientation is immutable and it could never change, and that anyone who's trying to help somebody change can only ever do them harm. But what if that is not the whole story? Well, today we're going to be speaking with Mike Davidson. He's the president of the International What's the word?
foundation.
Foundation. Thank you. Is it a human right to be free to change? There's this enormous. Is it a human right to be free to change? There's this narrative in the culture that says human sexuality is innate, that our sexual orientation is hardwired and it could never change, and that anybody who wants to support somebody who wants to change. Is it a human right to be free to change? There's this narrative in culture that says human sexuality is innate, that our sexual orientation is locked in and it can never change. It's hardwired. And that anybody who tries to help somebody change could only ever do them harm. But what if that's not the whole story? Well, today we're speaking with Mike Davidson. He's the president of the International, oh, I can't get the word,
Foundation.
Foundation. Of course, it's a foundation. Okay. National Foundation. Sorry, Mike. Give me just a moment. I'll get this. Is it a human right to be free to change? We've been told this narrative for so long that human sexuality is immutable, it can never change, it's hardwired, and also that anybody who tries to help somebody change could only ever do them harm. But what if that's not the whole story? What if is it a human right? Is it a human right to be free to change? We've been told this narrative for the longest time that human sexual is it a human right to be free to change? We've been told for the longest time this one narrative that human sexuality is innate, it's hardwired, and it can never change. And that anybody who tries to help someone change, it could only ever do them harm. But what if that's not the whole story? And what if some people want to change? Well, today we're speaking with Mike Davidson. Mike's the head of the IFTCC. It's the International Foundation for Therapeutic Choice in Counseling. And he's got data and stories that will completely change your view as you get a broader understanding of just exactly what a sexual orientation is, what it means, and what the data truly says about people's journey. By the end of this episode, you'll be able to more deeply understand sexual orientation and what change efforts have looked like historically, what they are and what they aren't, and you'll be way better informed to understand what the big deal is in the international courts right now. Enjoy.
Yes.
Okay, I think we've got it. All right. Perfect. Well, greetings, my friend Mike Davidson. Thank you so much for being with us, Mike. We've got to know each other a little bit through your leading of the IFTCC, and of course some wonderful mutual friends. Thanks, mate, for being with us today.
It's great to be here.
Thank you, Mike. You've become the president of the IFTCC, and so you spend a lot of time, a lot of your effort, your daily hours, thinking about the laws and therapeutic guidelines and practices to do with sexual orientation change efforts. Could you just give us some, basic definitions? What are we talking about when we say that? I think most people might not even understand what we're talking about when we say therapeutic choice and the terms that we're using. Maybe just an outline would help us all sort of come up to speed.
Probably the first thing to say that SOCI, or sexual orientation change efforts, is actually a term invented by people who would oppose us. It's not our own way of expressing things, largely because it sounds as though some therapist or counselor is seeking to change a client, which of course is not what we're about at all. SOCI, if you understand it correctly, is about the fact that some parts of the population are unhappy with so-called sexual orientation and behaviors or feelings that they experience, and they want to move away from them. They're just not comfortable either with the identity or with uh, the practice. And that goes for both people who have a faith background, but also those who don't have a faith background. There is just something incongruent with what is happening in their lives and what they're experiencing. And they make a decision that they don't want to go in that direction. They want to go in another direction. And that's essentially what we want to support. We're not about telling everybody else how to live. We just want to preserve and protect the right and freedom of people to make choices that are consistent with their own values.
Mm-hmm.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it really does. And it strikes me as just rather common sense that we live in well, most of us live in a rather free Western democracy, or so we think. And what you're saying now just seems to be sensible. People get to choose their own personal choices, whether that be an orientation, a preference, a hair color, whatever it may be. But so, what's the big deal? How come there's a group who don't seem to enjoy the freedoms that I suppose the rest of us might say we just take for granted? And what brought you into the fight? How come you saw the need to sort of develop a community of people who thought the same as you?
Well, I think the short answer to the question is my own issues and my own journey. That's really what has precipitated the fight, if you like, or the determination to be free enough in this world. And I suppose the issue is that there is a claim that is trumpeted internationally that any intervention, whether therapeutic or counseling or pastoral, is intrinsically harmful. And I think what we're dealing with is this notion of harm. And there is an insistence that if a person goes in this direction and is assisted by a professional or by a pastor, this is going to end badly and it's going to hurt the person. And I guess that is what is being disputed by people whose, long-term testimonies, we're not talking 6 months, but maybe 20, 30 years of life and of life experience is teaching us that it is possible for individuals to be properly supported, ethically supported, and to find the help that is consistent with their own values. And that's essentially what we're seeking to do. And I guess the reason for bringing people together is because I think the enemy rules by dividing and by isolating people. And we feel that it's very important that there is a group of voices who should be supported and liberated to the extent that they're able to share their own testimonies or their own journeys, their own stories of what has happened in their life and how they are experiencing life, the ups and downs, the positives and the negatives, but the direction that has, I guess, helped them to feel more integrity in terms of how they live their lives.
Mm-hmm. So, if I could just spell it out for people who may not be so familiar, uh, you and people, your friends, your colleagues, and people you've supported over the years, mutual friends actually, are saying we want to contend for the rights that we felt are being infringed. And those rights are the opportunity to choose where we go with our sexual orientation. We want to make those determinations. We've got reasons, and the reason to have to even advocate for that is because there's these sort of a series of laws that are just closing in on that freedom to be able to choose and to be able to, more importantly, get psychological or pastoral support when you're going in that direction. And on the other hand, perhaps this is represented across sort of courts in Europe and other places here in Australia. There's a group saying that anytime you do anything in support of someone who wants to leave LGBT orientation for heteronormative orientation or for no specified orientation, just to say I don't want to be identified this way, anyone that helps them can't help but do harm. Is that how you might articulate the two sort of warring perspectives here?
Yeah, once again, it's this notion that any intervention is intrinsically harmful. That's the theory. And the way I would respond to that is to take this term orientation and treat the term more critically. I think my own concern is even among believers, in churches, this term orientation has been received uncritically. We take it into our framework and our understanding, and we believe that this is a neutral term. Whereas I think the reality is this is a word with a mission, in the sense that it was designed to achieve something. What is it designed to achieve? Well, I would say it's kind of like a torpedo that is aimed at the biblical anthropology that we know and understand to have been established, right from Genesis through Ephesians and into Revelation. This whole notion of two-ness and complementarity between male and female, and the role of men and women in society, and how this is projected and portrayed in scripture in terms of, well, in many different ways, but which supports this idea that God created men and women, and together in that complementarity, he spoke about the image of God. So there's something very sacred here. But this word orientation, I feel, can have very direct consequences in terms of how we think about sexuality, because embedded in it is this myth, I would argue, that, as you've referred to, that sexuality is innate and it's immutable. It cannot change and it's inborn, and that's the end of the story. But I think the reality is very different. If you think of orientation as something fixed, then logically you have to hold to this notion that change is impossible. Therefore, any intervention is intrinsically harmful. There's a logical progression working and emanating out from that word. But if we examine it and look more critically at it, perhaps what we're talking about is patterning in human sexuality, that there are templates that we experience as human beings that begin to develop through experiences that we didn't invite into our lives, things that happened to us, or it may have been things that we did commission, we did look for opportunities, we took them, but all of these different experiences eventually begin to form a template. And that template forms a pattern, and that pattern then plays out in our lives very often. I prefer that way of talking about sexuality because I think what it picks up on is the fact that human sexuality, unlike gender, male and female, is very fluid. And I think many of us have experienced this in our lives. I think actually, if you look at that part of the population that isn't 100% heterosexual, you will find that there is a large proportion of the non 100% heterosexuals who are mixed attracted. I'm deliberately not using the term bisexuality here because I'm trying to illustrate a difference here. They can go in different directions. And, if I'm 50% attracted to men and 50% attracted to women, then I find it difficult that any one direction should be closed. So how is it that if I, as a 50-50, to use a theory, make a decision that I don't want to go towards men, I want to go to women, why is that intrinsically harmful for me to be supported to go in that direction? Why is choice being taken away just because I have made a personal choice about going towards pursuing women instead of men. I just don't understand the rationale here, but it comes back to this assumption that if you try that, it's going to harm you. Well, why is it not going to, you know, what are we saying about the harm that is surely inflicted on people who, are basically being forced to remain in their 50% desire to go towards men? This kind of must stay gay thing. Once gay, always gay. And if you start in that direction, you cannot go back in a different direction. It makes no sense to me.
I'm just looking something up as well. What? Because I'll read it out, but I'll dive in on the back of that. That's really good. Thank you, Mike. Let me find it. Doesn't matter. Yeah, Mike, it just strikes me as not that I would use this language, but it's actually, if you were to be technical, it would be heterophobic. It means it's totally okay to head towards a L or a G orientation, but if you head towards heteronormative, anyone who helps you is harming you. I mean, which is just bizarre. I don't know why. I mean, there's so many issues. There's the libertarian issue. Why should state-funded therapists and government-directed mandates be orientating, determining someone's orientation? Surely that's an area where the individual gets to choose. So, I mean, this just major problems. But what I find probably more troubling is the degree to which the academic fraud just goes unaccountable or unidentified. No one's calling it out. Back in the 80s, the authors of, I've said this many times on this podcast, the authors of After the Ball made it very clear that they were aware of complex factors behind why somebody in childhood would develop the sexual orientation that they had. But they said it's very important that we don't ever talk about that we need to describe it as immutable and innate, because if it ever became, considered something like a choice, then there'd be morality would be brought into it. Well, yeah, we do bring morality into things. That's called bringing your own personal worldview to the table, your own ideology. And my goodness, the lack of integrity there is staggering. I'm staggered. Lisa Diamond, who's, I believe, self-identified as a lesbian and wrote the 2014 handbook, wrote large segments of the 2014 APA, American Psychiatric Association handbook. It says that sexuality is fluid throughout the lifespan. So, I mean, there appears to be no consistent or no logic that's keeping true to the data, even the data of well-established bodies. It's sort of just crept its way into the public mind, and everyone still thinks that, oh, he or she is gay, he or she is a lesbian. There's this sort of just concrete anthropology, even in our language.
Well, I think that's true. And there's really a gap, isn't there? There's a lag in terms of what we know about sexual fluidity and what the average person in the street thinks about sexual orientation. We're kind of locked into this fixed idea of orientation. But at least Lisa Diamond and the authors of After the Ball, well, I mean, at least there's a degree of honesty there, in that they recognize these facts, but ideologically they differ from our point of view, even though they share this, or they may reference the idea of fluidity, and that people have different experiences. They would never support the work that we do in the IFTCC because ideologically they are on a different page. And I think that's the fact that we just have to recognize. And I think ideology is not something that comes out by argument, if you get my meaning. Ideology has to be exposed for what it is. And we do our best to argue from our different respective points of view. But I don't know, there's something very deeply at work here that I think just keeps these two positions entirely separate. I think Christians and people of faith, we may not be able to resolve that, but what we can do in the meantime is establish alternative ways of functioning in the world and fighting for the right and freedom to be able to move in directions that we believe to be right and to be consistent with our own consciences. And I think we should continue having these debates. We should do our best to explain the truth from our respective points of view. But if we think we're going to win easily on this, it's clear that we aren't. And therefore, there's no time to be lost. We simply have to, work together to find the ground that will best enable us to be able to call those who have ears to come in the direction that we believe that they would want to come in. So we're not trying to change the rest of the world. They have a different ideological point of view. We don't agree with it. We don't believe it's not harmful. We believe it is harmful, that it will harm families, it will harm society, that it will harm the church. But we have a responsibility to get on with what we need to do right now. That's
Yeah.
probably half irrelevant. So,
No, it's good, Mike. I think there's there really is just a tremendous clash of worldviews. I suppose if you took the lens of, there's a Christian ideology and a liberal ideology, and they're waging war, and sometimes people they think they have both. They think they have a Christian ideology and it's quite liberal, but I'm talking Orthodox Christian perspective here. Yeah, I understand that. I understand that they are ideologies that may clash forevermore. But I wonder if there's not a middle group of people who maybe they have a faith view of life, maybe they don't, but actually believed the science, actually believed that science was seeking to do something truthful, actually believed that people writing guidelines would commit themselves to a degree of academic integrity, and actually believed that we do, for non-believers and believers alike, we do believe in some of these notions of liberty and justice and freedom. And when you just look at it from that lens, if I never do this, but if I just wasn't even trying to see this through the lens of Christianity, if I was just trying to say, hold on a second. First of all, sexual orientation is fluid, full stop. It's not hardwired. An orientation itself, as I understand it, can include who you're attracted to, what your experiences are, and how you identify. Now, I would say every person on the LGBT spectrum has had at least one, if not all of those three domains of an orientation change. First of all, your experiences are constantly changing. Every day you have new experiences, so that's changing. It's not stable. Your orientation can change. The continuously added letters to the end of the alphabet soup, the LGBT alphabet thing, also reveals that people's identification is changing. And we absolutely know that people's attractions change, not only because the majority, if not a huge number of those who have ended up in an exclusively, who would identify as exclusively homosexually attracted, at some point or another, there was more often than not bisexual attraction or attraction to both sexes. We just recently reported on this, but the adolescent health study, which showed that from adolescents who had identified as non-heterosexual, as 12 to 19-year-olds, by the time they're 24 to 34, in the last phase of this large 20,000 population study, a well-validated database analysis, it found that 70% of those who had identified as non-heterosexual identified as exclusively heterosexual those years later. That's without any intervention. That's without IFTCC or Mike Davidson or anyone else. That's just changing. So it's obvious from the data that people change, and it's obvious from the data that change can go in both directions. And without even a religious perspective, it should be plain to see that if you, as the governing body, as the lawmaker in the land, you say you can go one way towards LGBT, but if you try and go the other way, we'll criminalize anyone who comes near you. We'll make sure you get no support. Now, that is just cruel, corrupt, harsh, lacking integrity, and it's just wrong. It's just immoral. These are immoral and black. It's clear as clear. These are wicked laws, and you don't need to be a Christian to see that.
And I would
Yeah, I know.
add
Yeah.
that it's not even scientifically accurate or true. I mean, we have the same equivalent studies called the NatCell studies in the United Kingdom that have discovered exactly the same thing, that those who identify in one direction don't necessarily identify in the same direction some years later. I mean, it's plainly in the record, not only in the UK and in Australia and in the UK. It's a well understood fact. I think the point that you are making around scientific integrity is really important. It came home to me during what was, I think, nationally the largest survey that was conducted in the United Kingdom, 2017, 18, I think it was, the national survey. And I remember taking the survey myself, but only getting so far into it. And then I was booted out. And the reason why I was booted out is because I no longer held an LGBT identity. There was a time in which that was no longer relevant to me. And as I filled out the questions, so it was clear that I could not progress in the survey. So the survey design, which was the largest the UK had ever undertaken, started from the beginning by excluding anybody who had an alternative experience, anybody who had left LGBT identity, or anybody who had experienced any kind of value in working with a professional or in a pastoral context, so that identity and practices started to change. They didn't want to know about it. And this is the point. Where is the research on this minority? It may be a minority within a minority, but it's still a part of the population sample. Why are we generalizing LGBT research for everybody who has experienced homosexual impulses in their lives? You cannot impose that data and make that the norm for everybody, because the cap just doesn't fit for everybody. We know that this is basic methodological or ethical practice to make sure we don't generalize in this way, but it's been done. in this context. So I support what you're saying. This is about scientific integrity as much as much as it is about any ideology that is being expanded.
And I honestly think most of this is helping people see that Christianity is true, that a Judeo-Christian moral ethic, Christian sexual ethic is actually a good thing. I think I think when people are talking about getting sued for saying that men can't breastfeed, allowing males, biological males, to beat up females in sports, and just all these things. People are seeing the writing on the wall, but I don't think you need to go that far. I think there's just something about even just the meanness. I mean, with the LGBT advocates bang this drum of marginalization, of injustice all day. And for starters, just speaking with integrity and truth, nowadays you are far more likely in our nation, Australia, and probably in most Western nations, far more likely to be vilified for having a Christian sexual ethic than having an LGBT sexual preference. Absolutely everyone would know that. If you come out, I really would, anecdotally, culturally, I think it would be very difficult to find places in Australia where the majority says, oh, if you've come out as gay, we're going to vilify you. It's just that ship has sailed. I'm sure there might be pockets here and there, but that's just not the cultural norm. But absolutely, sat with the young people who have said, look, I've just told them I believe the Bible, and I was torn shreds off me, not just from friends, but from school principals, from university lecturers, people who won't pass their papers. I had a year five student, year five, that's 10 years old, hauled before not only the teacher, then the head teacher, and then ultimately the principal, because this year five student said, "Sir, I've heard all the stuff you've tried to teach us. This is in a public school in New South Wales, in Australia. Sir, I've heard all the stuff that you want to teach us, but after all that, I still only think there's two genders. There's just two. That's it, men and women." This kid got absolutely hammered by his leaders because he said something which is to most of us just really obvious. And so there is something of a meanness that's coming out of this LGBT advocacy that says to a person who has chosen freely to leave LGBT orientation, it says to them, "Oh, you don't exist." We get it all the time. We get it in the comments of this podcast. We have people who say, "It's my job to prove these testimonies," scare quotes, "testimonies aren't real." Translation, you're trying to say that this individual who is sincerely and honestly telling you their story isn't real. Who the hell are you? Who do you think you are to try and tell someone their story isn't right? That is an infringement on one of the most fundamental human rights, to allow people to choose their story, express their story. And of all the groups to be trampling on that right, it is a deep irony that it's those who would proclaim an LGBT, support of a minority like LGBT. I find it just ethically bankrupt, to be honest, not just academically.
And across the world, people are being cancelled and bearing the consequences in their professional lives, and the silencing and the cooling are going ahead. And that's exactly the intention. This is now uh, the exact working out or the end of the after the ball direction. Maybe they didn't plan it to go this far. I don't know. But it is something that is taking hold increasingly. I think what I would want to say is I think we must be very careful in the terminology that we use. So if we are going to talk about change, and I think it's a good gospel word, I mean, what is the gospel if it doesn't change lives and
Mm.
change directions? But I think when we're talking about sexuality, we probably need to qualify that we're not talking about flipping a switch and then everything comes right. I came to the Lord in my late teens, and had a wonderful experience of conversion. But the day dawned when I realized that actually there were some desires in my heart that hadn't been taken care of in my conversion.
Mm.
And that led to a kind of um, direction of some depression coming, because I felt, well, there must be something wrong with my conversion. It didn't do a thorough enough job. I still had some impulses, some confused thinking, some desires that felt inconsistent. And we can argue that's just the product of internalized homophobia, but by the same token we can also argue that that's a person's conscience and a person's sense of discipline that began to kick in. And it didn't take away from the fact that after conversion I still felt these impulses. And that's what challenged me to continue the journey and to see what could be done. And when I found professionals who supported me, that was, a key moment. I have to say that there was a point at which I shared my confusion in later life, because I grew up at a time when you didn't talk about this. Nobody spoke about it. So you didn't easily open up and talk about these things. But when I did finally, uh, my pastor said to me, well, you've been really brave, but please don't share it with anybody else, kind of thing, because, for whatever reason, that was his response to me. But I was not satisfied with staying where I was, because I felt that the God of the gospel can help us, not only with our behaviors, but with our desires, the deepest parts of our lives that I felt in my life certainly had become disordered. I wanted to bring that before the Lord. And that's what I did. And so began a journey that took me not only in the direction of pastoral care, but also looking at what professional spaces could do for me. And that's why I'm passionate, because
Mm.
I feel that that choice, that opportunity is being taken away from this generation.
Mm.
Actually, now on both levels, pastorally, it's being challenged, but
Mm.
professionally, for decades, it's been something that you've not easily been able to um, get professionals to consider and work with you on. And that's why I think this area is really vital.
And Mike, thanks so much for sharing and your clear, compassionate reasons for wanting to help people who, and many, we know many of the same people, and there's people across the world who have described the exact same phenomenon. They have real experiences, real feelings of same-sex attraction or confusing feelings or whatever. And for many, they don't see any issue with it. They appear to be happy with that and don't want anything to change. And for them, we probably don't have the same worldview, but we would say, God bless you, you're free. You're free to do as you choose. Um, and more often than not, maintain great friendship and dialogue. But then there's others who do decide that they want to change. We know them from young right through to old, who do decide that they don't want the feelings of same-sex attraction for many reasons. There's religious reasons can be one, but there's other reasons people choose a different direction, and freely. It's just so important to emphasize that freely, without any coercion, without somebody telling you this is what you have to do, of their own volition, off their own steam. They want to go in this direction. And given how challenging some of these questions are, how deep some of the issues go, and how often you need to look into childhood to get to the bottom of finding out where you've been and where you're going, not just in an LGBT context. For nearly all of us who come out of a broken world, there's a journey. That journey often needs someone to walk with you. You don't want to do it alone, and it's so crucial that people have that person or those people there, whether they're professional, pastoral, even a parent or a friend. And we've seen and we know the people who have undertaken that journey and have seen transformation. We know them, they're real, their stories exist, they're not making it up. They have beautiful stories to tell, and every single one that I've spoken to is over the top compassionate towards people experiencing same-sex attraction. There is such a deep love, such a great fondness and a kindness and a degree of acceptance. We know Drew Barriessa, who he's got a twin brother. His twin brother continues in gay relationships. Drew doesn't, but I believe they have wonderful relationship. My brother's the same. We've had discussions about this. We don't necessarily see the same way at the moment, but there's no love loss. There's a seeking to understand one another more than anything, and it does just feel really sad for these individuals, these real people who are trying to explore something. And to be honest, Mike, what they're probably engaging in is called the normal Christian conversion experience. We come to the Lord and we get a glimpse of his goodness, his holiness, and we reflect upon our own lives. And what do we see in our own lives? We see our sinfulness. We see our need to be transformed. I didn't have same-sex attraction issues, but God revealed to me the deepest layers of brokenness, sinfulness, areas that needed change, ways of thinking that were unhealthy and unhelpful. That's called following Christ. He forms you, he puts his potter's hands over you and molds you and shapes you into the man or woman that he destined you to be. And that process is beautiful. I wouldn't change any of it, even though I did have to come to terms with painful things. You have to look back into your childhood. You have to think about the things that your parents blessed you with and the things that you also want to leave behind as you grow up and grow in faith. So to try and exclude someone from that journey, it just seems, I know I'm getting sort of a bit riled up here, but it just seems so mean.
Well, I think it's worth reflecting on the change that people do experience. It's not perfection. It's not something that is completed because of a religious experience or because of a course of therapy or counseling. But there's a change of perspective. There are new goals that are set. That doesn't mean that there is no appearance of the old life. It doesn't mean that temptation doesn't come. But what it means is there's a change in the heart and the direction that heart is traveling in. So I think for many of these people, they would call themselves good enough. They know how to function in a way that is consistent with their own values and is also consistent with what the Word of God, which they believe to be the truth, calls them to live in. And our enemies would say that's nothing but repression. But they would say, well, actually, it's discipline. It's what I am called to do. And as I live that life out, and as I, put to death the misdeeds of the body of sin daily in my life, I grow in grace. And so I agree with you. That is the normal Christian practice. You deal with things that you know are inconsistent with the Christian way of living. So we're not talking about, a light switch moment. I believe that there are some individuals who are instantly delivered. I've known one or two in my life where these issues went and never came back again. But that's not the normal practice. The normal practice is that people have a conviction, they have a set of goals, and they start walking in that direction. And as they do, things begin to work out in ways that they never imagined. So I've seen people late in life who were settled on a gay life move in a direction towards um, dating women, cultivating a special relationship, and then entering into a marriage relationship, and they're still married. And it's not, it may not be perfect, but where is this perfection?
Yeah.
But as they work together as man and wife, and as they work out their salvation in fear and trembling, I believe the God of grace is there, taking them on towards the goal that he has for each one of us. And I think that is simply what we are protecting, the right of people to go in the direction that they feel they are called to go in. And for them to be excluded from professional therapeutic help, I think you're absolutely right. It's cruel, but it's also indicative of the fact that the system will not allow any kind of pluralism in this area. It's a monoculture. That's what happened to me when I started my psychotherapy training. I was 3 years into my experience. It was all going well. There was no problem in, the academic work I was doing, or the practical work that I was doing, or the supervision stuff that I was doing with my supervisor. Nothing at all. But I fell foul of the fact that the ethical practice of the United Kingdom Council for Psychotherapy said that it was an ethical offense to try and help people move away from unwanted same-sex attraction. And I challenged it. What else could I do? Because this was really the whole motivation in my life and in my life journey. I challenged it, and to cut a long story short, after an interview on the BBC, I received a message to say that I was suspended from my training. A week later, it was confirmed. I went through an appeal process, but basically, they refused to allow me to qualify. Why? Because I held an idea that was inconsistent with the ethical values that they feel need to be promoted in this country. And that's the issue. It's worldview. It's a different understanding of anthropology, why man exists, and how we are constituted as male and female. Those are the differences that are being attacked. It really is a gospel issue. There was a time here in the UK when I was told, well, this is not a first issue. This is not a salvation issue. Well, I really think it is, because it attacks the fundamental, foundational structure of what has been revealed in God's word. And that's why it's so vital that we support people whose testimony of grace in their lives is different from what we are being told is the norm. And they are finding joy and peace and connection. They're not museum pieces. They are just human beings who have determined to go in a certain direction. And I feel that fundamentally needs to be respected. That's all.
Mike, I can't help but see it if we just switch gears and talk about, as we have been, the lens of religion, the Christianity lens. I'm sure it could be equally applicable to Orthodox Judaism and other religions, but I'm a Christian. Let me talk to it from that lens. What's been outlawed? You lost your registration because you're a Christian. These are the facts of the matter. You lost your registration because you, as I see it, you upheld a Orthodox Christian sexual ethic. That sexual ethic isn't purely heteronormative. The sexual ethic, the ethic of Christianity describes a very sort of polar opposite perspective to what we now see in the sort of post-Freud, neo-Freudian, I would say sort of identity politics influenced way of thinking that leads us down this path. Here's the two poles. Christianity says there's something innately wrong with you. You are born into sin. You have a broken nature. It's sinful and broken. It's in rebellion against God, and there's one way forward, which is to turn your life to Christ, repent. So it is a salvation issue. Repent from your known sins. It means turn away from your sins and begin to follow Jesus and allow him to renew you, to wash clean which was dirty and broken, and to be healed, saved, forgiven, delivered, and established. Now that might take a lifetime, but that's the direction of your new life. This sort of the influence of Freud has led many schools of psychotherapy to identify the inner self as that which is most sacred. If you can discover your truest innermost being, particularly your sexual being, that's when you'll hit the jackpot. That's the eureka moment. You've discovered the highest truth, which is your inner desires, which may have been repressed or suppressed, and tapping into those is what really living is all about. And so, of course, it's reframed that anything which challenges your newly discovered, though fluid, inner self isn't just harmful. It's actually called violence. They would phrase it as being violent against the human person and obviously harmful. Now, these two worldviews are completely clashing. One talks about human brokenness and the need for transformation. The other talks about human sanctity, the sanctity of the human inner world. Well, I'm afraid to say our laws, even here in Australia, in Victoria, would go beyond being pro-LGBT and really do move into being anti-Christian. Let me explain. The way that sexual orientation is defined in the Victorian laws here in Australia, sexual orientation isn't defined as the scientific literature defines it, which includes identification, experiences, and desires, but it's rather geared towards experiences. So if you attempt to, in the language of the legislation, I'm not saying anyone ever does this, but if you attempted to suppress or convert someone's sexual experiences, you might run afoul of the law. This is broader than LGBT. See, Christianity has a sexual ethic beyond LGBT. Christianity proclaims a monogamous, adult, consensual, heterosexual relationship. So it's beyond just that it's heteronormative. There's also these other elements. So it's possible, it's not likely, but it's possible that someone could be coaching someone towards a biblical worldview that includes, God's got a lot to say about every area of our human relationships, including our sexual ones, our romantic ones. So someone's providing instruction about biblical teaching on sexuality and says, hey, it's actually like you got to lock in on that one girl or that one guy. God's plan is that you would get into a covenant marriage and stay with one person. And if that's not congruent with someone's experiences, you're literally running afoul of the legal definition for change and suppression. It's just baffling. It appears to be pretty obvious that it's not just pro-LGBT. It's very much anti-Christian, which I guess if you trace the roots of identity politics and sort of cultural Marxism, you see Karl Marx's manifesto to kill God and private property coming true.
Well, it's sobering, and it can be discouraging, but I guess the antidote is we overcome by doing good. We work as a community of believers who know a different reality, and we may be small and insignificant and powerless, but that's where it all began in with the gospel. But you know, PJ, there's something interesting that's happening, even though we are speaking at the moment from a Christian viewpoint. I have to say that some of the most successfully transformed individuals that I have known in the work that I do have not been Christians. They've come from no faith or other faith backgrounds. I remember one particular individual, highly educated, clearly entrepreneurial, had everything going for him, you know, satisfied in his LGBT lifestyle until he wasn't. And he wanted really just some mentoring and for somebody to stand with him as he went in a different direction. And over a period of 3 or 4 years, that's exactly what I witnessed. It wasn't really much that I did. I was just standing shoulder to shoulder with him and being a support. But there was an intrinsic desire that he had to go in a different direction. And for him, what that meant was when he went to gym, instead of just, you know, doing all the cardiovascular stuff and looking at the mirror or the TV or whatever it was, he set himself goals to start talking to the other men at the gym, something he had never done. He sometimes objectified them in terms of how he looked at them, but he saw the need to actually, you know, push past any of that and to get to know the individuals. So he began to take classes, and within the classes, he not only sought to connect with other individuals, but he made sure he never connected only with one group of individuals. So he would discipline himself that every time he went to a class, he would partner with somebody else. And slowly his world began to open up because he found value in forming friendships and relationships with, you know, just ordinary men and a variety of older, younger, good looking, not so good looking individuals. And over time, things changed for him. And to the point where he is going in a completely different direction now. And that, you know, is everything resolved? Is everything undone? Is there any appearance of, you know, homosexual temptation? Well, I'm not sure he'd say that everything has ended, but the desire for that has gone. And there are new pursuits and goals that he has. And now he has a consistent relationship with a woman, and they're going towards marriage. You know, you can't deny that. You have to respect the integrity of that individual. It's not even that he's been exposed, you know, to some therapeutic model or some kind of professional who has particular skill, but he had a determination, and all he needed was mentoring and support, and it took him in the direction that he wanted to go in. We can't deny people that.
Mike, as I hear you speaking, I just love your consistency as a Christian, as a brother. I love your faithfulness, and I just even think, you know, to anyone watching, whether you're a faith background or not, uh, you really are consistent. You you're living a life that uh, endeavors to help people to freely discover something good if they want to, and not have that opportunity taken away because of an unreasonable, perhaps even totalitarian type of idea. And I just love seeing it. I love hearing the stories. We know so many people who have walked this journey and have come out with a really just a spectrum of different outcomes, and I think that says a lot. This is a really individual thing. People should be free to explore that journey on their own. And thank God for people like you and the IFTCC doing your work. Mike, as we wrap up today, is there anything you'd say to someone who's watching and maybe they've been uh, interested in something that you've said, but they're somewhere along the journey of trying to discover their own sexual identity and orientation, and maybe they do want to see changes and they want help? What would you give them as a piece of advice?
Well, I would just say, you're not crazy, and neither are you on your own. Uh, you will find individuals who can support you. And what I would say to the professionals and to those who are in difficult circumstances who can't move, I would encourage them to think about what they can do to join groups and organizations that do stand up for these values, and to see the value of fellowshipping and being in communion with these kinds of individuals. The thing that concerns me, PJ, is unless we entrench in societies somewhere in the world the right and the freedom to do this legally, that is, to seek the accreditation and the support of professionals who feel the same way, it's going to get increasingly difficult. If it's difficult now, I would say in a decade it's going to be almost impossible. So now is the time to lay the foundation and to fight for all we are worth. And even if we lose the battle in terms of accreditation in our various countries, we will be better organizations and individuals for the fight, because we will have worked out what the ethical principles are, and we will have worked out what the safe practices are. But if we try to do that as individuals, I'm afraid we're going to have a very difficult time sustaining anything. So we need to be joined together and to find a way of doing this. So I guess, my plea would be for individuals who experience these just to know that there is help. It may take time to find it, but there will be those who will walk with you. But also to the individuals who are in a position to help them, folks, we have to work together if we're going to overcome this difficulty in the world. We have to find ways of associating with one another and creating an alternative movement. I'll
We
quit
need each other.
now.
We need each other, Mike. I love it, and amen. Thank you so much for your time, mate. It's a real honor. I've watched you fight so gallantly and um, so consistently over so many years. God bless you, and thanks for all you do, and thanks for being with us.
All right. Thank you, PJ. God bless you.
Hey, I think we did it.
Well, I hope you can retrieve something there.